So as I said, I am going to start the presentation off today, and I have a pretty simple type of a talk that I'm going to cover, and it is supplementation methods for stocker steers. So before I really get into some of the work we have done here at the station, I want to ask you directly, why do we need to supplement cattle? Not just stockers, cows, everything. Why do we need to supplement them? So I kind of came up with a list. One of them, we can use supplementation to actually increase forage intake. That's what we really hear a lot about, protein supplementation on dormant native range. If you supply extra protein, you're going to make those cows, instead of them only wanting to eat about 1.8% of body weight, they'll eat 2% of body weight just by protein supplementation. Your forage is lacking in energy or protein, like this gentleman's comment on his forage quality. You're just lacking. Lack of adequate forage. There's your drought scenario. Requirements often exceed that offered by your forage base. That kind of dovetails into that keep the cows conditioned. You know, 1,000-pound cow versus a 1,800-pound cow. How many more calories does that 1,800-pound one need versus a 1,000-pound? Nearly 50% more. So your forage might not have enough to actually meet their demands. And an inadequate ratio of protein to energy. Now that one you might be sitting there going, what? To optimize intake, cattle need to have a diet that's twice as much energy as protein. If you happen to be feeding something like wheat pasture, for example, it's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. It almost has as much energy as it does protein. You're not maximizing cattle performance on that. So we want to make those all match. Now, for those of you who are more visual, this just kind of shows some of those examples. So in the top figure, what is on the left bar, that is your cow's voluntary intake meeting their energy needs on, say, dormant native range. Now we've supplemented in the yellow a little bit of a protein supplement. You can see that intake of her forage has gone up, and now she's met 100% of her needs. The other option is, you know, kind of your drought scenario. They only were able to eat, you know, in the middle, they were only able to eat 80% of their needs because of limited forage. You fill in that extra 20% with other feed to make it up to 100. The bottom scenario, I'd love to get back into that for some stuff, but you actually are supplementing feed to replace how much forage they're consuming. So then you're able to run more cows on less acres, increase your stocking rate. A great example of this came out of Oklahoma State University, where they were supplementing stocker calves, 0.7% of their body weight with, you know, their Oklahoma Gold product. And they were able to increase stocking rate 33% on that pasture and still maintain appropriate cattle production and maintain their forage. We got to have a little rain before we can get back into that, though. So we have several reasons why we supplement cattle. What have we done specifically for the stocker steers? here at the Southeast Research and Extension Center. So I'm just going to highlight two specific studies because, well, actually, even before I get there, I'm going to highlight two specific projects that we were wanting to look at what kind of supplement helps us economically, cattle performance-wise, and pasture management-wise. So how many of you get just a little bit confused or just, you know, overwhelmed with the amount of products that are out on the market that could be fed to cattle? Anybody? Yeah. I mean, we've got our traditional feeds, your corns, your distillers, you've got blocks, you've got liquid, you've got added yeast, you've got added this, you got added that. That's the good thing about, you know, so many products. No one product meets everybody's operation. So you can use many different things to meet your goals and objectives. So we wanted to see in Southeast Kansas, which of those type of feeds or products can actually be useful for stockers in Southeast Kansas. So we utilized 4 pastures that are about 5 acres each, stocked with 4 head on bromegrass. And so, you know, when you go out the building, just look across the road. We have 20 bromegrass pastures over there. And we wanted to look at what happens when you feed just a mineral to cattle, a liquid feed, you know, free choice one. Here's the disclaimer. I am not promoting a specific product over another. These were just the ones that we were able to get a hold of very easily here in the Southeast area. So we had a liquid feed that, you know, is delivered by the company, the co-op, to us. A protein block, or, you know, one of those pressed molasses type of blocks, or we were hand feeding the cattle. So we had 3 years of study I'm presenting, 21, 22, and our calves for the 23 years still out there on study. But my wonderful technicians and interns just weighed them yesterday. So I was able to get 84 days worth of data to show you what they've done thus far. So our objective was to compare methods of feeding, free choice versus hand-fed. And we also looked at 2 different corn varieties. And you can see on your little, you know, on your tray that we have some corn that looks like traditional, just yellow corn, but then some that have purple/black, depending on what your color is. That is an indicator kernel for a specific product called Inogen feed corn. It's from Syngenta. And the Inogen feed corn has what's called alpha amylase in it. You know, get into the whole metabolic deal. Amylase digests starch. And so when they first came up with the Inogen corn, it was for the ethanol industry. They were putting the amylase in the corn so that the ethanol industry could be more efficient at extracting the ethanol from the starch in the corn. And then they found that we feed it to feedlot cattle in particular, you can increase efficiency of gains by 10%. So we were looking to see if that corn reacts differently on grass than traditional corn. So we had, you know, like I said, our free choice mineral, which is just a traditional stalker mineral. Our self-fed treatments, which was a liquid feed, which was mixed 30. That's the one that we utilized. It's from Agridyne. And in a second, I'll show you the nutrient profile. It offers a pretty significant amount of fat as well as protein. So it is both a protein and energy source. We use the Mentrate 40 red block from ADM, which is primarily a protein source, but it has one of the best balances of rumen digestible and bypass protein that you can find on the market, and it's all natural. And then we were feeding daily a 60%, 40% DDG blend, corn DDG blend, at 0.5% of body weight on a daily basis, on a body weight basis of the Inogen or the isoline. So when you see isoline, that's the parent corn line that made the Inogen. So they're the same they should be the same genetically, just one has the amylase, the other doesn't. Don't get bogged down all the way in this. This information or this table is in your proceedings reports, so you can really spend more time digesting it. But overall, when you just look at the energy and protein, our corn and our mixed 30 products end up offering about the same protein and energy on a pound of dry matter offered. Our Mentrate 40 offers a little more protein than some of the others, but not quite as much energy. So now, set all that up, what did we see? So along the x-axis, we have years 21, 22, 23, and then the average over the 3 years. Now remember, 23 is not finished yet. This is just the first 84 days that those calves have been out on pasture. In the dark purple bar is our mineral only treatment. The yellow is our mixed 30, our liquid feed. Our gray is block. The pink is the isoline or traditional #2 dent corn. And the olive color is Inogen corn. Overall, within year even, our hand-fed cattle, those that were receiving the corn distillers, they had higher average daily gains than any of the self-fed products. How much was that? Our hand-fed calves gained 0.6 of a pound more average daily gain over these 3 different years versus the self-fed products. And the part that was really surprising to me, and maybe it's just my mineral is that good, I don't know, but you can see the mineral cattle versus those that were supplemented with our other 2 self-fed products, they all had the same gain. And I'm real excited to see on this 2023, right now it's looking like our mixed 30 calves are actually gaining better than our control at least. So we'll see if that maintains it through the entire feeding period. So another thing that you always think about with supplementing cattle on grass is, what do they look like when we're getting ready to sell them? Are they too fleshy? Are they too, are they green? How is that going to pay into your payments? So I have an ultrasound machine, and off of grass, we actually get carcass ultrasound information. And, lots of figures, but here's the bottom line. When we hand fed our cattle every day, we ended up having 30% more back fat on those calves. They had about 2/10 of an inch of back fat versus, just a little over 1/10 for our non-supplemented calves or our free choice ones. But at the same time, those hand-fed ones also had 10% bigger ribeyes versus our other supplement strategies. And down here, marbling, we actually did not change marbling in any of those calves depending on our feeding regimen at that time. And I didn't show it, but actually all these calves were choice coming off of grass, according to the ultrasound already, low choice. Okay, so we were talking about supplementation, looking at gains. What did it do for us in regards to forage production? And this is just showing 2 years worth of compiled data that we had cattle grazing during this whole time frame, because last year, when do you think we had to sell all these calves? In August. We had no grass in August, so this was my most complete data set. Now, in May is typically when we turned out onto the pasture. And August was when we pulled off last year. And then the year before, they went all the way to November in 21. As you would expect, or hopefully would see, when you are grazing a cool season perennial, which shouldn't be growing a whole lot during the summer, because that's when it should be, kind of going dormant, you should see reduction in forage or available forage out there. And we did, on average, see that from the start of when we grazed till the end, there was 40%, of the cattle consumed about 40% of the available forage out there. But one thing that I thought was really interesting was everything we had supplemented, regardless of whether it was a self-fed supplement or hand-fed supplement, there was 15 to 25% more forage in those pastures as compared to just the mineral only. So our supplement, even though we didn't necessarily increase gains per se on our self-fed supplements, that mix 30 in our block left us with more feed out there, more available forage. And interestingly enough, when you did the math, this is the percent reduction in available forage. That mix 30 that offered both energy and protein feed had the lowest reduction in forage. So it had the most forage left out there of any of the treatments. So before I'd started that project, I had something very similar, still looking at method of delivery, whether it's a free choice or you go out and hand feed them every day. But in this one, I also wanted to know, did the ionophores help us? So we fed rumensin in these different products. So on this one, we had 3 pastures with 4 head each pasture. We had our same stalker mineral. And then our free choice feeds, we had that Mentrate 40 red block, but they also make one that's got rumensin in it at 300 grams per ton. Then we also looked at our mix 30. And then we hand fed those calves a little less, 0.25% of body weight of a 50-50 corn distillers blend. But on this one, we only fed them 3 times a week, trying to, reduce the number of trips out to the pasture, seeing how much corn we could put in and not have to deliver it daily. Because typically, if you're feeding more than 0.3% of body weight a day of corn, you have to feed them every day. Otherwise, that cornstarch bolus just kills all those fiber digesting bacteria in their rumen. So that's why we kind of went with this 0.25 3 times a week, so that when you did the math, we stayed below that 0.3 total corn intake. And on that, we had no ionophore, or ionophore included at 130 grams per ton. And these calves grazed on grass about 151 days. Now on this one, I am going to go ahead and show we did follow these calves off of grass into the feedlot to see what they did. And we just had a traditional, simple feedlot ration, 85% whole shelled corn, 10% corn silage, and 5% of our supplement that carried Thailand and ruminants in it. So what do we see from our average daily gain? So we have our grazing period is these first set of bars, our feedlot period in the middle set of bars, and the whole system. So from the day we bought those calves until they went to be harvested. Similar to what we saw before, our hand-fed calves, those that were fed just 3 times a week, that supplement, had 0.2 pounds improvement in average daily gain as compared to the self-fed supplements. And in the feedlot, for anybody who follows systems research, the calves that gain the least on grass always gain the most in the feedlot. That whole compensatory gain effect. They read the book. They followed that exactly. So in the feedlot, our self-fed, our steers that were self-fed on grass had a little under 0.3 pounds improvement in average daily gain as compared to our hand-fed. So when you had a 0.21 and a 0.27 advantage and flip-flop them, what was our overall advantage? Nothing. Our average daily gains were all the same for the whole system. So from weaned calf until they went out into the hung on the rail. So like I said, I wanted to throw this in. Don't spend a lot of time looking at that and figuring it out because it just makes you sick. But this shows you the variability in our intake. All those purpley type lines, those are our free choice feeds. Intake is nowhere near consistent. Our corn in the black and the grays, consistent intake all the way across and increased with size because we're feeding it by size. So here's me getting on my soapbox. If you are having trouble with a health event like anaplasm, or your cattle are not consuming their mineral and you're feeding your cattle corn or distillers, put that mineral, put that antibiotic in that hand-fed feed, not your free choice. That free choice, their intakes are so up and down that very rarely are they consistently getting the amount of antibiotic they need. Looking at performance or carcass measures, the only advantages we saw or differences we saw, those calves that were on hand-fed corn supplement on grass tended to be a little fatter at harvest and had a little bit higher yield grade. There we go. Here's your question. What about the costs? And there's an economist in the back, and he's going to cringe at this, but here's my cowboy math. And I actually am going to work with an economist to come up with how far can you physically travel with these hand-fed supplements versus the self-fed before, it's more economical to go one way or the other. So just using our gains performance intakes from our 21 to 23 study, I scaled everything up to 100 head and we traveled just a 20-mile round trip. So we're not even talking that far of a trip. 6 bushel corn $5 a gallon diesel, which, you know, those are probably a little low still, but over that 21 to 23 time frame, that's kind of what those numbers were. And we did include a small slide for those fleshier stalker calves. You know, the greener ones usually bring a higher per price premium. However, your fleshier ones often have more weight. So that almost ended up as a wash. So our cost of gain on the mineral was 5 cents a pound. On the block was a quarter. Our mixed 30 was 8 cents, and our hand feeding was 27 cents. However, you know, because the most expensive one here, you know, was your hand feeding. When we looked at net profit compared to that hand feeding supplement, you know, set that at 0, we actually gave up $127 a head on that block supplement, $82 a head on the mixed 30, or $73 a head on just the mineral. So I'm not telling you right now for your operation, you have to go hand feed your stalkers every day a corn distiller's blend. You need to go through this exercise and kind of use some of these cost of gains and figure out within your operation how far you can physically travel out and deliver these feeds. So thank you. I will take some questions as we're getting the next presenter brought up.